What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about compliance, but not as compliance, but what does that mean for an organization? And we're competing for the longest session title, Does your organization have a keep everything strategy? Learn how to harness your data explosion with intelligent information protection and governance. How about that? I didn't come up with it. I would have made it a lot shorter, but that's what it is, and that's what we're going to talk about. The things that we want you to take away from this session are basically threefold. I'd like to introduce you a little bit about information protection and data governance and what we as Microsoft do in that area. What makes Microsoft uniquely positioned to help you with questions around that. Ideally, at the end of the session, I hope you get an idea of the need and the urgency to start with information protection and data governance. And I hope that I've given you some ideas on how to get started and talk to your organization about this. And last but not least, and that's what Tina will do. Tina is my colleague right here. She will take the second part of the presentation. She will do all the demos, and she'll talk a little bit about upcoming features and things that we will see. So let's get started. When I started in IT, and I'm not going to tell you how many years that was ago, but when I started in IT, the world was really, really simple. If somebody wanted to get on the network and get access to your file servers, me, one of my colleagues stepped in. We asked everybody to switch off their PCs. We cut the coax cable, put another PC in there, switched everything on, and we had network access. Some of you might remember that. Since then, the world has changed. It's no more physical access or physical security. The world has changed into something like this. Everything connected. Data is everywhere. We got a lot of examples here. We got cloud, we got sensors, we got IoT, vehicle. Everything's there. Everything's connected. And this will give you, it's a great world. We're seeing all the benefits of this type of connectivity. But with this connectivity, we see a lot of challenges because every system, every little thing that's in there has some kind of data. Data that can be about people, about persons, it can be sensitive data, and that's a big challenge. The second challenge we're seeing in this model is that it's now very common to have a device, and wherever you are, doesn't matter if you're on the Wi-Fi, on cellular, or on your PC at home, connect to the corporate data. So what happens to that data? How can we control all this connectivity to that data, and where does our data travel? And if you're seeing what is happening to that data, it's exploding. And we've looked to the people inside of Microsoft. And what we've learned is that within 10 years, we're now producing 20 times as much data per day as we did 10 years ago. And that's not going to stop. It's going to explode even more. And the question is, what is it you're going to do with that data? Because if you open up newspapers, if you look at the different websites, the different blogs, you will see that there's a lot of mentions of data breaches, data that ends up in locations where it should not be, that's being published, there's a lot of vulnerability there. So what should you do? Should you just delete everything that's there? Or should you keep everything that's there? I don't know. Somewhere in the middle there might be a reasonable solution. We've come across organizations that exist for 100 years and had the policy to keep everything. They have every single document, every single piece of data somewhere over the last 100 years. And that's a lot of data that you have to protect because you don't want that data to end up on the street. A couple of facts that we've learned, and I really like the top one because that's the one we also used in our presentations around compliance, around the GDPR, about compliance manager. We did a survey, and what we found is every single day, updates are being published on the different rules and regulations and standards that there are. 200 different updates every single day. And this is not from one, but it's for 750 regulatory bodies. And the question you have, and you see yourself confronted with, is how do I keep up? How do I even know what is relevant to me as an organization? Is it updated to the GDPR, to NIST, to ISO, to whatever other standard there is? How do I keep up? How do I understand what I need to do? That's a big challenge. And is that something that you're going to address all by yourself, or are there any other options? As I said, the data is exploding. 163 zettabytes of data per year. When I started off in school, I had a floppy disk with 160 kilobytes, and that was the only floppy disk I used throughout the whole year. Things have changed since then, and it's exploding. And with the explosion of the data, the cost of compliance also increases. We're seeing a lot of solutions, we're seeing a lot of things that need to happen, and that cost is exploding too. We got some numbers on that too. So what it is you could do? Well, when you're a fully on-premises customer and you manage everything within your own organization, you have to make sure that you know about these 200 plus updates per day. And you have to understand that you know each and every one of them and can filter through it what's important to you. Everything that needs to be done in the realm of compliancy is on your shoulders. That's what you need to do. But when moving to the cloud, you could start leveraging what we call the shared responsibility model. If you look at what Microsoft, for example, in its cloud solution has done over the last couple of years to become compliant, and you look at the different controls that are being implemented to help you adhere to all these regulations, you will see that in some cases maybe even 70–80% of all the controls are already there in the solution that you're buying from a cloud provider. That means that the rest, which is way less than that full 100%, is something that you need to do. So leverage that shared responsibility model. If you look at that data explosion, are you going to continue like that company that saved all this data for 100 years? Where are you going to store it? And what's the risk? Remember several years ago, I remember a bank that went it went bankrupt, and people were shredding stuff and making sure that not all information was available anymore. That is a black and white example, but you will see that some of the information that you have within your organization, you should not hold on forever. There is a good reason for deleting that. And other information should be kept. How do you distinguish between that? So what you need to do is you want to make sure, and that's what we're going to talk about today, that you have something in place that can help you manage that enormous data flow and that data growth. And of course, you have to do that at acceptable cost. If you're a very large organization, it's a slightly different story than if you're a small or medium-sized company. But still, cost is very important. And if you're going to look at compliance and start selecting tools and add-ons and all kinds of platforms that can help you with that, you know that your cost will skyrocket. So the idea is maybe try to find a solution that is integrated in what you're already doing and offers all the capabilities and all the features that you need to become compliant and stay compliant. We as Microsoft believe that with our cloud services, we have an answer to that question. What we're doing is we're not providing you with isolated tools, with bolt-on solutions. We're trying to integrate that whole spectrum of tools that you need inside our own cloud solutions. What we've done is we look at compliance in 3 different pillars: assess, protect, and respond. And basically, the assess pillar is where you start looking at what you have. What is it I need to do to become compliant? What is it I need to implement? What kind of people changes, process changes, technology changes do I have to implement to become compliant and stay compliant? We then move to the protect, where we really start thinking about how do I protect all that data? Do I need encryption? Do I need access control? I think the answer is yes to all of these. And the last one is responding, because once you have protected your organization, once you have protected your data, of course, you need to make sure that you're still staying protected. And you have to prove to other people that you are protected and you're doing the right thing. That's what we're seeing too. People select our products because we give them insight into what we've done to do the right thing to become compliant. And it's just like a base thing. If you're not adhering to all these standards, I'm not even going to talk to you. So what we're doing is we're trying to provide solutions, answers, features to every single phase of that story around compliance. Starting off with Compliance Manager, the Services Trust Portal, in which we publish all our information, all the things that we do. Information protection and governance, that's what we're going to talk about today. But also the other things are there. So I want to show you a quick story to, again, show what I just talked about. This is about Johnson Controls, and they will introduce themselves. It's just a quick video.
40% of energy is consumed by buildings. We're collecting more and more data. We can make smarter and smarter decisions. Together, Microsoft and Johnson Controls can dramatically lower that energy consumption. Johnson Controls is roughly a $30 billion corporation, 100 manufacturing facilities, 130,000 employees. It has morphed into this massive business that does all the HVAC for buildings across the globe, as well as doing fire and security. So data security, the ability to ensure that you maintain control of the operating system and all the devices is critical.
Buildings create a lot of data. We collect over 200 million records every day, and we have not even scratched the surface.
We're managing over 10 petabytes of data behind the scenes. We have thousands of Microsoft servers. If you actually look at our storage, it's almost going straight up.
Having Microsoft 365, we're able to put retention labels on documents and sites, and that automatically will purge after the retention period.
Microsoft Information Protection as a suite of capabilities, that's really what we're looking for, because not only then do we get our information into the system, but then we can rest easy knowing that we have the labeling mechanisms and the right security to maintain and manage the full life cycle of our data.
The partnership between Microsoft and Johnson Controls is actually 1 + 1 = 3. Our ability to create new solutions and scale them across the world is incredibly high. Together, we create something greater than either of us could have done.
So basically what you've just seen is that very, very first picture with all the connected systems. That's what Johnson Controls is doing. They have all these buildings that they monitor and they control on the air conditioning systems, the heating systems, everything is there. And they manage enormous amount of data. And what they realized was that all the data that was coming in, at some point in time, not only the data would explode, but they would explode themselves too. And they started wondering, what is the best solution to help us control that data, manage that data, make sure that we can govern it. And that's the story around information protection and governance. And that's what I want to talk a little bit more in detail about. So when we start talking to organizations or customers around information protection and information governance and asking them about the strategy they have, or if they even have a strategy, these are 3 questions that typically come up. And the first one is the most interesting one. I've done many assessments with customers on, for example, the GDPR. And the first step in such an assessment is try to understand how big is my problem. And that starts with just one question. Do you know how much data you have? And they go like, that's difficult. And then there's the second question. And that's even a worse question, because typically what they answer is not what it really is. Because the second question is, do you know where your data is? And typically they come up with the answer saying, well, we got pieces in the cloud, we got some on-premises servers, and then there's mention of some laptops and stuff like that. And then it stops. And then you start asking them, do your users use Box and file services on the internet and maybe have cloud services or Google Drive or whatever? And they go like, yeah, it's there too. So that is the first biggest question. Do you know how much data you have, and do you know where it is? The second question is, do you have an ability to control that data? And I'm not talking about just one piece of the data, but do you have an overall solution to control the flow of that data? Can you control that data that you recognize as really sensitive to your company, that should not end up on the street or in other hands, is really being stopped at the gates. Do you have such a solution? And last one is, if you do have a solution, what does it consist of? Is it like all kinds of different solutions that are bolted together because this one is protecting the on-premises world and this one is protecting a cloud service and? Because that will also help you understand the agility that these customers have in making changes to their data governance. What if they want to protect or unprotect something? What do they have to do? Is it just one policy that will govern everything, or is it a change here, a change there, and a change there? And that multiple changes, that multiple configuration updates, of course, means cost. So we heard questions from them, because that first question, where is your data, usually leads to another question from them saying, can you help me find that data? It's everywhere. And how do we address that? Of course, we can help you find your data and analyze your data. But we should also help you with defining a data strategy, a storage strategy. Is storing all your data on a local laptop without any other solutions around it, is that a wise thing? Because can you manage the data that is on all your 25,000 corporate laptops? Maybe some time to think about other solutions. How do I manage that data in a uniform way? Not being forced to change things in different solutions, but have one unified policy that I can apply to all my data. How do I protect my data? Well, there's a lot of questions there, and I won't go into every one of them, but that's basically what we're hearing. So how do we answer these questions? How do we approach data governance throughout its whole life cycle? Well, for us, there are three keywords. It should be in place, suite-wide, and built-in. And basically what we're saying is there should be only one solution that is integrated in what you're already using, and it should be about everything, everywhere where your data can reside. On-premises, in the cloud, in a hybrid situation, it should not matter. It should be an overall solution. And the key word for this is that your end users that are doing their normal jobs should not be bothered by all these extra facilities that should enable data governance. It should be transparent to the users, and it should be a natural thing. Users should be able to create a document, create something, and then just realize, okay, we're protected, it's governed. To zoom in a little on that vision of information protection and governance, basically, it all starts with discovery. Discovery of data. Where is your data where your data is should not matter. If it's on premises, if it's on a device, if it's on an ice, it should not matter. Once you've discovered the data, you should understand what the data is about. Is this sensitive data? Does it contain privacy-related data? Is this something that could harm my company if it ends up in the wrong hands? Or is this public data? So you should think about classifying your data. And once you've done that, you should label your data, because you do not want to go into the same process of finding it, understanding it over and over and over again. Once you know what it is, you should label it, and then the labeling is your start to the next phase of managing and governing that data. And basically what we do is we split that into two pillars. One side is the protection pillar. That's basically saying, hey, if we're going to do something with that data, and we're going to send it to somebody else, we might want to protect it. We might want to make sure that if that data travels to locations that I might not even know, we'll make sure that it's protected, it's encrypted, it has restricted access, it has a watermark in it, it says confidential. That's the protection pillar. The other pillar would be the governance pillar. What happens to that data? You create a document. Should we keep that document? Should we delete that document? And what is the rationale for doing that? How do we know if a document should be kept or deleted after 6 years? And that's the governance pillar. So we're looking at two types of policies, protection and governance. And of course, when we have implemented that, we want to make sure that it's also working. We like to understand how many of these documents did we label? What is happening to these sensitive documents? So we need to have a monitoring solution in place. A monitoring solution that gives us the option to really look at what's happening in our organization and what's happening with our data governance and protection. As I said, we use two pillars. Sensitivity on one side, sensitivity all about protecting the document, encryption, content marking, data loss protection and access control, making sure that your data is protected. And that is totally different from the example I given at the very beginning of my presentation. Because in the old days, it was very simple. You did not have to protect anything. The only thing you had to do was lock the door. What has changed since is that there is no more door. Data is just everywhere. And instead of protecting access to the data, you now have to protect the data itself. That's what we're doing. Sticky labels, making sure that everything is protected. The retention thing is something that happens in-house. That's when you do your house cleaning. So the information protection solution has, we've introduced what we call Microsoft Information Protection. Because in the old days, when we talked about information protection, we talked about Azure Information Protection, or we talked about Office 365 data governance, Office 365 labels. What we're introducing is the overarching umbrella called Microsoft Information Protection, which is actually not a product or not a service. It's an umbrella under which all these different solutions live. Because information protection is not only about protecting the document, but if you want to protect access to it, you might also want to protect identities and have identities in place. So there's a whole list of different services that live under that umbrella, and together they will form what we call the information protection. When you talk about information protection, you basically talk about two products. Data governance, which is the entry point of information protection. And what we're offering in data governance is everything that has to do around retention and deletion. We offer the capability to do labeling of documents, but the labeling is done manually. A user will have an option when he's creating a document or an Excel file or whatever to label a document as sensitive, public, private. And Tina will show that in her demo. What we'll see in the next slide is that there's also a different option. So we're offering the capabilities of labeling, manual labeling, we're offering retention and deletion, and we're offering archives. The next step up will be what we call advanced data governance. That advanced data governance adds capabilities to that previous slide. Basically what it does is it offers the capability of auto-classifying. So a user starts creating a document, and in the background, we're analyzing that document. We're analyzing that document, for example, for the presence of credit card numbers or social security numbers or driver's license, as an example for GDPR privacy-related information. And once that information is found in a document, the document is automatically classified, and the user will be informed saying, hey, because you typed this, this document is now considered a private document or a personal document. Do you want to change that? And there's a whole mechanism around that. And Tina will show that in her demo. What we're also offering is label analytics and disposition. So, which means that the moment you start implementing retention, what needs to happen to a document if the retention period has expired? For example, you say a document is will expire after 7 years. Will you just throw it away, or do you need somebody to look at it and then decide to throw it away? That whole mechanism around disposition, but also label analytics. How many documents have we labeled? What kind of categories do we see? How many documents aren't labeled? That's what we're offering in advanced data governance. Customers that have started with data governance, advanced data governance, they of course have questions, and they're looking for more things, and they're running into new challenges. Things that we hear is around importing. We see that customers have enormous amounts of data on premises. And a quote from one of our customers is, we're all into Office 365. That's what we're using, that's our solution of choice. But I got so much data on premises, please help me to bring that data into Office 365. Make it better, make it easier for us. And we'll show you what we're doing in that area. Governing our data, record systems, what we're seeing is that there's common data, documents that need to be protected, deleted, and the standard procedure. But you will also have documents that have a special status. If you have online contracts, things that are signed, these documents need to be protected as if they are a records management. We want to make sure that once a purchase order or a contract or whatever reaches a certain status, that document can never be changed. It's frozen and it stays there for a predefined time. That's what we mean with records management. Many organizations used to have a separate solution to do this kind of activities, separate records management. We believe that we can just implement it in our solution. Because if we're already managing our documents, next step, logical step would be take that management to the next level and say, we're marking these documents as records and treating them as such. And the last one, and that's an important one too, the whole monitoring part. Customers are asking us over and over and over again, we need more insight in our protection, our data governance. And that's where monitoring steps in. So what is our vision on that? And this is not all reality yet. We're going to talk a little bit about upcoming products, but it's good to understand what will happen. If you look at the diagram on the left side, there is what we call dark data. We found enormous amounts of data within a customer premises. We have no idea what it is about. How do we get to a managed situation? Well, what we do nowadays is we use like standard sensitive data types. We scan data for example, things that are related to financial services, healthcare services, or privacy-related things like GDPR, the examples of credit card numbers, personal information. That's what we do. That data, and that's the small, or the bigger white circle in there, that's data that can easily be classified based on these out-of-the-box classifiers. On the right side, there's also an attempt to classify data that we cannot recognize, that a person really has to look at it and open it and see if that data is, what kind of data is that? Is that data that we should protect, delete, keep? That's what they say. That's a very, very intensive process that costs a lot of money. And that's a process that you want to avoid. And even if you do that, there's still that whole bunch of data that needs attention. And how do we address that data? Well, on top of what we're offering right now with the sensitive data types, the out-of-the-box things we're looking for, we're going to introduce what we call machine learning in our discovery and labeling capabilities. And what we're doing is we're introducing context and meaning around our classifiers. To give you an example, and Tina always has, you have a pathetic life. If you look at the different words, and if you read that sentence in a mail, you have a pathetic life. All these words by themselves are not offensive. There's nothing wrong with them. But when put into that context as a sentence saying you have a pathetic life, that could be very offensive. And that's where the meaning of all these words and the context is there. So, and that's what we're trying to introduce with machine learning. We try to help customers analyze that dark data by being smart, by understanding what's in there, by making sure that we can train our qualifiers, and in that way find more and more data to classify automatically. This is an upcoming feature. We're bringing in all kinds of, and trying to improve all kinds of classifying methods with machine learning, with training to facilitate that process. And of course, what we want to do is we want to address everything around import. So, and this is about import, all that data, trying to bring it in, but bring it in a smart way. We try to govern it. We try to improve governing data with machine learning. And last but absolutely not least, the whole monitoring part is very important. If you look at the modern records management, we can look at it from two angles. from the information worker, from the people that are actually doing the jobs within your companies, and from the admins, the people that manage the records. Their point of view is different. The information worker just does not want anything to do with it. It should just work, it should be there, and they don't want any overhead. It should not limit their capabilities. While the records manager, the IT manager, has questions around manageability, automation, and analytics. And what we're adding is a lot of features to address these 2 points of view and to make their life more easier. You will see some of it in the demos from Tina. And with that, I want to hand it over to Tina, and she will lead you through the demo.
Thank you.
And I'll be back at the end. You're welcome.
Okay. So before I jump into the demo, I want to show you something I think is pretty cool. So now we have the capability when you have your data labeled by our sensitivity label, when you try to drag into your personal OneDrive account, then we block it. We say, hey, you shouldn't do that. So if you have that Windows information protection and have your sensitivity label on your document, that's something really cool. Another cool thing is that when you drag that into Gmail, then it also blocks you. Like it says it's confidential data, you shouldn't send it through your Gmail account. Another cool thing is that if you want to copy this to USB, like a lot of people are doing that they might doing this in your organization, we also can help you to flag that and then block that from copying to your personal USB drive. And so how to set this up, I'm gonna show you quickly from here. How many of you have seen the sensitivity label or retention label? Okay. And how many of you have used data governance or advanced data governance? Okay, cool. So it will be really cool to show you the live demo then. So let me switch to the window here. So the label configuration is on the protection.office.com, which is Office Security and Compliance Center. So if you come to here and then click on classification, and then you can see there's 2 labels under the label tab now. So the first one is the sensitivity label, and the second one is the retention label, which Francois just helped us to introduce that to you. And so the screenshot I just shared with you, it's about sensitivity label. So I'll quickly show you how to create that label. So you click on the creation of the label, and now you can name your label. So here, I want to create a label for GDPR sensitivity information. So I'm gonna name my label as GDPR confidential. And then the second box, I can actually enter some text for my end user to see what kind of label this label is. So here I can type in, it's for GDPR content. And then click on next. And here you can enable encryption policy. So I turn on the encryption policy, and there are several options I can choose here. So I can choose either I want to encrypt all the files and email message, or just do the email message in Outlook. I can say I want access to become expired after a number of days once the label is applied to this document. So here I want to say 7 days. After 7 days, I want to expire that access. I can also choose whether I allow offline access, and since it's a GDPR GDPR-related content, I don't want to have any offline access. I can also assign permission here. So here, when I click on assign a permission, I can either add all tenant members, or I can add specific user or groups, or even like specific email or domain. So here I want to add one for all tenant members. So once I click on this, I can choose the permission. And then the permission could be owner, author, reviewer, viewer, or a custom one. So for all the tenants across my organization, I only want them to view it. I don't want them to edit it. So I choose the viewer, and I click on save. And I can assign another permission to a user group, saying that for a specific group, for example, here I can say for the research group, I wanted them to be able to edit the content. So I choose this group. I add it here. and I can choose a different permission for them. So for them, I can let them either author it or review it. So here I choose the author and save it. So you can set up like granular control for different users, different groups across the organization. And then after the encryption policy, I can actually turn on the content marking. So for the content marking, you can do watermark, header, or footer. And so here I want to apply a watermark for my document. So here I'm gonna add a watermark saying confidential. And then you can adjust the font size and the layout, etc. So I click on save and I go to the next one. So the screenshot you see is actually this endpoint DLP. So if you turn on this endpoint data loss prevention, and if your account has the feature enabled or like you have the SKU including this feature, then you will have that benefit that the screenshots I just shared with you before the demo. And so I apply endpoint DLP for this file so no one can copy into their personal drive, Gmail, etc. And then I can enable auto labeling. So the auto labeling now is building on the AIP client. So you will need to have the AIP Unified Labeling Client installed to have this auto labeling capability. And I'll quickly show you how to set it up. So once you turn on auto labeling, you can add condition. And so I can say content, contents, and then I can add sensitive information type. So this is the sensitive information type Francois just talked about, that we have more than 120 sensitive information type template that you can choose. So here I'm gonna click on add, and then since it's a GDPR related label, so I'm gonna key in the keywords EU. And I see there are 6 types of EU information here I can choose. And so it's debit card number, driver's license, etc. So I add them into my condition. So any document that has debit card number, driver's license, we use the pattern recognition technology to help you to identify those files, automatically apply label to the documents. So then you have those protection policy you just created enforced on those documents. And then you can also choose more condition here saying that, oh, I want to automatically apply the label, or I want to recommend the user to apply label. So here I'm just gonna choose automatically apply the label and then click on next. So I'm not gonna create it because it's gonna take some time, but then it's the way you're gonna create your sensitivity label. And now I want to show you about retention label. So very similarly, but then a little bit different because it's more of a retention policy. So here I'm gonna create a retention label. It's for retention and deletion policy. And so I can say GDPR retention and 7 years. So I want to keep the data for 7 years. And then click on next, and I turn on retention. So you can see the experience is like very similar. And then here we also have a lot of controls you can set up for. So I can say 7 years here, and I can choose delete automatically after 7 years. Or a lot of the time, the organization like to trigger a disposition review. And there are multiple reasons. Like if I return the data for 7 years, there are gonna be so many things happening in 7 years. The regulation can change, your organization can change. So you don't want to delete it without reviewing. Then you can select a disposition review group here to help you to review that content before you delete it permanently. And then you can also choose nothing. I just want to leave the contents for 7 years. So here I'm gonna say delete the content after 7 years. You can create a label, you can apply the label and the year based on when it was created, when it was modified, or when it was labeled. So there are some granular control here you can select. And then if you want to classify this document as record management purpose, then you can check this box saying that this is a record label. So once you check this box, then no one can delete or edit this content. It becomes a records. So I'm gonna choose the records as well. And then I can create this label. So I'm not gonna create this one. I'm gonna show you another one I already created before to show you some more capability about the labeling. So once you create the label, there are multiple things you can do. The first thing is that you can publish the label. So when you publish the label, then your end user can see that label from their user experience and help you to apply label to document. And then so here, I want to choose GDPR retention 1 year to publish this label to my tenant. And I can choose specific location here. Like I want that the user to classify data from Exchange and only OneDrive. Then I can turn the other two off and then click on next. And then I can name my policy saying that it's GDPR for 7 years, delete per record. So your end user will see this policy in their mailbox, and they can choose it and then apply the policy on the email or on the files in their OneDrive. And you can publish the label. Takes around 1 day for you to publish the label, then the end user can see from there. And another thing that is a really cool thing to do, the second thing you can do with your label is auto-apply a label. So this is the advanced data governance part. So a lot of the time, we tell our employees to do something, and they will say, yes, I'll do it for sensitive information. I'll apply label. But then you won't be able to trust them because it's hard to put the accountability on end user. So that's how advanced data governance can help you to automatically detect those sensitive information and enforce the policy. And so here I choose this GDPR retention 1 year to auto-apply label. And there are two options here. So I can either choose a specific keywords or any search query. So here I can key in some of the keywords I think it's sensitive and I want to monitor and enforce the policy. You can also use content type, like NDA content type. So you can do all the search query here and apply label. And another way is to use our sensitive information type template. So you can either customize your policy, create your own template, or we have a lot of built-in out-of-box template that you can use. So for example, here I can choose the GDPR sensitive information type. And you can see there's the same 6 sensitivity information type I saw in the sensitivity label. And so once I choose this, then the system will scan through the environment, identify the files with all this pattern they recognize, and then apply and enforce the policy on the document. So I'm going to choose the GDPR sensitive information type. And I can name it as GDPR 1 year. Sorry, this is for 1 year. And I can choose the location as well. You can customize your location here, and then you can start your auto application. So that's the labeling part. And another cool thing I want to share with you is that it's new. So for example, this is a label I already created before. Then now you see there is a button here, it's explore items. So if I click on this, then I see what are some of the files that are labeled by this label. And it's pretty cool because a lot of the time customer asks us oh, I don't trust your automation. I don't know whether you label it accurately for my tenant. So I want to check what kind of files you label with this GDPR label or this 5-year retention label. So you can actually check the files that are labeled by this label from here. So if you see this SharePoint and OneDrive location, and you can actually open the items and then view the items to analyze and validate your label application. Okay, so it's about labeling. And then another thing about data governance is about setting up retention policy. So a lot of time you just want to set up retention policy. It doesn't need to be sensitive information. You just want to set up retention policy. It could be organization-wide, or it could be like for your executive email, you want to keep longer than other employees' email. So you can create that retention policy here. So here I'm gonna create a retention policy saying that executive email for 10 years. And then I can change it to 10 years. And I can choose the location. So you can specify saying that I want to choose the recipient that is in my executive group. So I can choose this one, or if you want to create an all employees retention policy, you can also do so here. And you can choose this, done. And then so they only apply the policy for the people that are already in this group. So if you add more people into the new group, into this executive groups, you need to reapply the policy again. And I can turn off other workloads and click on next, and I can create this policy. So this one is not about labeling, it's just more about you select a location and then apply a retention policy on those locations, on those documents. Okay. And then there is a really cool thing I want to share here as well. It's disposition. So this is the disposition review. So some of the documents, they already reached their retention period. So now I need to review them to see what action I should do. So here you can choose to apply a different label, saying that I want to apply it to a 5-year records label. I'm not going to delete it. Or you can extend the retention period, or you can just delete it permanently. So that's something you can do in our disposition review. You can also do bulk actions. So now you can select multiple ones and just select the actions from here. Okay. So that's the from the admin part, how you set up the label and policy, how you review the disposition, and then I want to show you as an end user, like how will you see that label experience. So this is a SharePoint online site, and then there's a lot of content here, so I can actually apply label into a certain site content or a specific library. So here, I actually want to apply a SharePoint Online site content label. So I can choose this setting here. And then you can see there is a link here, say apply label to items in this library. And so if I click on this one, then I'll see all the label that is published to the end user, and I can choose from there. So I want to apply apply like 5 years business record, and then I can apply label to existing items in the library. And any new items that are added into this new this library will be applied with this label by default. So this is something you can do for the site. And then when I view the document, I can actually also apply label from here. So for example, for this document, it's about GDPR tracking 1.1. So if I click on this information, open the details plan, if you click on this, then you can see there's apply retention label. So now it's setting up as public, and I think it's GDPR sensitive information, so I don't want it to be public. So I can choose 5-year retention and record label, for example. And then once I choose it, you can see it's a little bit small here, but you can see there's a lock on this Word document. And then so now I'm trying to delete this document. Are you sure you want to send the items to the site? Recycle bin, I say, yes, I'm gonna delete it. And then you can see there's notification popping up saying that you can delete it because it's a record, because we applied a record label on this document. So this is like the end user experience on SharePoint Online. So another experience in the Outlook, you can also apply label from here. So for this one, I want to apply label. I just right click on the email, and then there's assign policy here, and I can choose the label here for retention or deletion policy. So that's the data governance demo, and then I want to show you another really cool new product that we just announced. So this is intelligent supervision. So supervision is a capability to help you to monitor and review your employees' communication. And then so what are some of the scenarios for supervision? The first scenario is for your corporate policy. For example, you might have corporate policy that is anti-harassment. So you want to make sure there's no one harassing each other in your organization. So you can actually set up some keywords saying that, stupid, or like, you are not welcome, this kind of keywords into the policy. And then you can detect those keywords in your employees' communication and review those based on the policy you created. And then the second scenario is about risk management. So you might have teams working on M&A project, and then they want to make sure that no one in the project team communicate that information to anyone outside of the project team. So that's something that you can use supervision capability as well. And then there's regulatory compliance purpose. So in the US, we actually have a financial service regulation asking any financial service company to have supervision on dealers and brokers' communication. So that's a regulation that the company need to prove to the regulator that we are doing this between our dealer and brokers' communication. So there are several things several scenarios that can use supervision to help you to achieve that goal. So here in supervision, once you come to supervision, there are multiple tiles here show you just like a dashboard of the summary of your current supervision policy and the items that you need to review. So I'm gonna show you how to create a supervision policy. So here I click on create, and then I'm just gonna naming this policy 1. And I can choose the user or group that I want to have a supervision policy on. So here I can say I want to supervise my R&D team. I want to supervise these 2 people, and I click on add. And then you can see we now have teams included here. So it's a new thing we just announced that for individual user, you can select Teams chat. And for groups, you can select Teams channel for supervision. And you can click on next, and then you can select the direction. So for example, now if I only want to monitor for this M&A project, so I want to make sure the outbound communication is okay. There's no violation. So I choose the outbound one. You can also choose internal user within this group of people you select, how they communicate. Or you can either choose the inbound one. Anyone sending information to this user or groups, you can supervise it. And so I'm gonna choose the outbound one, and I can add a condition. So there are many choices of condition here, including like keywords or file types. So for example, if there's any contract, you want to make sure they only send out the right files, then you can select these file types. You can select domain as well. So for example, this group of people, they might receive a lot of their Amazon receipts from Amazon.com. Then you can exclude that domain. So you can say, I don't want to see the email from Amazon.com. So there are a lot of granular setting for the condition. You can also select our sensitive information type. So this is the out-of-box template that we just mentioned. So you can say any communication with PII, then I want to see whether they have violated the policy. So you can choose that as well. I'm just gonna click a random one. And then you can specify your percentage for review, because there might be a lot of document or communication that meet your condition. You don't want to review all of them. So you can select, I just want to review 10% of them. I'm just gonna sample it for review. And then you can choose a reviewer. So usually we create like a group of people for reviewer. So here you can choose a supervision officer. So only those people can review the content. And then you create your policy. So I'm gonna show you one of them that I created before, which is insider information. So here, if I click on this, I can actually open this policy. And I can see how many pending review items I need to review. And the review is in your experience. So you can actually go through the files and then see the native view for your text message or for image, etc. And then you can mark it as compliant, non-compliant, and questionable. And then so another cool thing I want to show you is that, let's go back to here. If I actually send out an email now. Okay, so I'm gonna send an email to Adele. And then I'm gonna put in the keyword I created for that insider policy, insider trading policy. So I create it and I click on send. So remember, the first time we opened this dashboard, it was 6 people, right? Let me actually refresh it again. So I need to refresh it so they can capture this new email. So now when I click into this insider information policy, I open it. And you see there's 7. And then this one is the one I just sent. So you see the date, March 21st, 11:45. So it's a real-time flag for you for reviewing those communication if you set up the policy in there. So super cool. Encourage you to try out the supervision capability if you have that needs in your organization. So let me now jump back to the presentation. Okay. Before the closing, I want to share with you this customer story. So this is a quote from one of our customers, Shell. So they were saying that 3 years ago when we evaluate Office 365, it's a no-go, no chance. But then 1 year ago, when they review our record management and data governance capability, they decided to bet on our capability to help them with this retention and data governance. So it's a really cool story to share. And then so now I'm going to pass you Francois to close the session.
Thank you, Tina. Wasn't she great? I hope what Tina showed was putting some ideas on what I told and bringing it to life. We're not at the beginning of a story, but we're also certainly not at the end. This information protection, this governance, this data is enormously important for us. It's a great opportunity to expand on our cloud services. What I've heard from the customers I talk to is if there was ever a moment when we did not regret to bring all our data to the cloud, or when we're thinking about the benefits of bringing it to the cloud, it's right here. Because bringing this into one solution that has capabilities like this, on top of all the other capabilities that you use to just do your work, is a unique opportunity. And we're building on this. I hope we've given you some insights in what is next and what is happening and what has happened over the last months, even years. And if I would talk about a call to action, I think, I hope it's clear what I'm trying to drive you to. We all should start to realize that this problem is becoming bigger and bigger, and the time to start addressing it is right now. We've seen the perfect storm a year ago, May 25th, GDPR. Everybody was about privacy and documents and worries. Then it went down a little, the attention was going down, and now it's coming up again. I'm not sure what you're seeing, but in my local newspapers, I'm seeing articles on privacy. I'm seeing all kinds of data breaches, people ending up in the news. It's becoming more and more visible. And it's just a matter of time when this is like standard operation. This should be done. So please, look at your own organization, work with your customers on implementing and validating the strategy around information protection. And do realize that if a company has nothing, is not doing anything, you do not have to aim for the 100% solution. Just starting off with introducing discovery, labeling, and some kind of retention, some kind of policies will already bring them to an 80% level. And yes, 80% is not 100%, but do realize 80% is 80% more than nothing. And that's something that we really need to look at. And keep feeding us with all kinds of questions and all kinds of things that you need, because that's what's shaping our product, that's what's building our product. So start off with talking to your customers, talking to your internal people about what it is you have, what kind of data you have. Start validating that, or qualifying that data, understanding what it is, and start managing it. And I hope when you start doing that, you start leveraging the features that we're offering you. And with that, we've come to the end of our presentation. we've provided a slide with some supporting articles. There's also toolkits on there. Our team builds toolkits around compliance, around GDPR, around discovery. They're free and downloadable. Use them whenever you want. And with that, I got 21 seconds for questions. And I have one.
There is a chicken egg situation for us at least, because we don't have anything in the cloud yet, but we want to bring it over, the content, also in mail, not all of it, of course. What of this functionality, AI-driven as it is available on-prem?
Yeah, so the question is, what do we do with the existing data that we have on premises? Data that we have in the format of files, but also on mail. Can we do something on-prem? And I would not say can we, I would say you should. Because if you're wanting to get up to speed with information protection, you want to make sure that all your data is in the cloud. Probably that's a lot of data. Where to start? And starting off with just analyzing the data on premises, and we do have tools, for example, Azure Information Protection works with the scanner that will scan on-premises data sources, and you can use the same mechanisms as sensitive data types, labeling, stuff like that, on premises, and based on what you find on premises, then you determine your migration strategy. Because if you have this amount of data on premises, maybe by just looking at it, qualifying and quantifying the problem, you can shrink that because you're going to get rid of a part of it. And then, based on the part you have left, you say, this is the part of the data that I'm going to migrate first. That's what I'm working on every day. And that's the part that's going to go second. So yes, and that's what we're trying to do, is we want to make sure that this labeling solution, this discovery, works across both on-premises, online, and hybrid. Does that answer your question? Yeah. With that, I want to thank you very much. I will take the other question. I can see something in the back that goes like this. That might be a question. Can I take that offline? Because I want to give the other people the option to go to the next session. Please come up to the desk. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day.